Hello everybody again. This is our usual Tuesday live stream. TruthFinders, good to see you. We got so far Good Servant, OUDC, not sure how to pronounce that, and Chow. Good to see you guys. Yeah, thanks for the nice compliment about earlier live stream I did on Quantum Research channel, and I will upload it to my channel tomorrow, as always. Every other Tuesday that we do that. So tonight we're going to do the Son of Perdition, which is also known as the Antichrist, the Beast, the First Beast. These are all the same entity by description. So what we're going to do is read a bunch of passages and then I'll just go back over it. So obviously we're going to start with Daniel 7 here and get a lot of good context. Normally I don't do the whole chapters, but I think I'm going to do that. We're going to do Daniel 7, 11, and 12. And then we'll go to some passages in the Gospel of John, 2 Thessalonians, and Revelation. And then we'll go back over it in a document that I've had before. Hey man, good to see ya. So here we go. Let's look at Daniel 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me were the four winds of heaven, churning up the great sea. Four great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, 'Get up and eat your fill of flesh.' After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the other beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I looked," this is a poetic section, that's why it's written the way it is, "the thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow, the hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were open. Then I continued to watch, because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and his body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all this. So he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things." So once again, when the interpretation is given, we can't interpret the interpretation beyond what the text gives us. And it says, "The 4 great beasts are 4 kings that will rise from the earth. But the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever." Then I wanted to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell, the horn that looked more imposing than the others and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. He gave me this explanation. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on the earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. So this should be really familiar to anybody who knows Revelation, or has at least read it. And like I said, I just want to read through it, but I will go through a couple of things on this. First, this is going to be a repeating theme throughout Daniel, and we'll see it again in Revelation. And it's interpreted for us here. And there was, something special about the 4th one. And then there's these I want to say entities in this chapter. The Ancient of Days, who is described in a certain way that sounds a lot like Jesus in the 1st chapter of Revelation. The throne with the flaming fire and the wheels ablaze is reminiscent of the one described in Ezekiel. And the thousands around him sounds like the scene in heaven. And there's a court scene going on. And they're going to judge this entity that comes up on the earth, this beast, this final kingdom. And then this other entity is one like a son of man, which I think is because Ancient of Days is God, and God is a Trinity, but the one like a son of man means the God-man, the Jesus who also took on human nature at a point in time, according to Philippians 2:5-11 and other passages. So that's what's going on here. Jesus is God. He is also a human being, and that's what people get confused about. But there's 4 kingdoms, 4 kings, and one that's special that's going to come later, and a couple of other things happen with replacements of 3 kings and so on. And the attempt will be to change the times and season, which means the sacred appointments, the festivals, the appointed times of God. You could take it 2 ways. You could take it as just wanting to change the sacred calendar, or you could take it as wanting to thwart the plans of God that God had set up so long before. It probably is both of those. But anyway, this is earlier in Daniel chapter 7. Now let's go to chapter 11 and see some more of this sort of thing. Okay, the kings of the south and north. This is another thing that we need to be aware of and keep in our heads when we're studying prophecy. And he says, I tell you the truth, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, then a 4th, who will be far richer than all the others. When he's gained power by his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king will arise who will rule with great power and do as he pleases. After he has risen, his empire will be broken up and parceled out to the 4 winds of heaven. It will not go to his descendants, nor will it have the power he exercised, because his empire will be uprooted and given to others. Now this, I'm going to stop and say, was Alexander the Great. This is, his kingdom did not go to any of his sons. He died fairly young, actually, of some disease, as I recall. And it went to the 4 generals. And this is way after Daniel got this vision and didn't know any of these people, didn't know who Alexander the Great was, but this is what's being prophesied here. You can tell in hindsight, it just fit everything perfectly. Then it says the king of the south will become strong, but one of his commanders will become even stronger. This is, I think, one of the Ptolemies was one of the 4 generals, and there were generations of those, so we got to be aware of that. And will rule his kingdom with great power. After some years, they will become allies. The daughter of the king of the south will go to the king of the north to make an alliance, but she will not retain her power, and he and his power will not last. In those days, she will be betrayed, together with her royal escort, her father, and the one who supported her. This is all past history so far. One from her family line will arise to take her place, attacks the forces of the king of the north and enter his fortress, fights against them and victorious, seizes their gods, their metal images, articles of silver and gold, carries them off to Egypt. For some years he will leave the king of the north alone. Then the king of the north will invade the realm of the king of the south, but will retreat to his own country. Again, this is all past. His sons will prepare for war and assemble a great army, which will sweep on like an irresistible flood and carry the battle as far as his fortress. Then the king of the south, and we have to remember, because this is past, we know where north, south, and east are in all of this. And it has to do with directions from Israel. Then the king of the south will march out in a rage, fight against the king of the north, who will raise a large army, but it will be defeated. When the army is carried off, king of the south will be filled with pride, slaughter many thousands, yet he will not remain triumphant, for the king of the north will muster another army, larger than the first. After several years, he will advance a huge army fully equipped. In those times, many will rise against the king of the south, and so then it says, those who are violent among your own people will rebel in fulfillment of the vision, but without success. And I'm not going to go into every detail from here on, but I'm just saying a lot of this was fulfilled in the days of Alexander and following, from his 4 generals and so forth. Then, let's see, I think they're talking, if I'm not mistaken, about Antiochus Epiphanes, if I have my years right there. And this is our prototype of the Son of Perdition. And thank you, a good servant. Just happened to look over there. Thank you very much for the channel support. Anyway, the invader does as he pleases, establishes himself in a beautiful land, have the power to destroy it. He will determine to come with the might of his entire kingdom and make an alliance with the king of the south. Give him a daughter in marriage in order to overthrow the kingdom, but his plans will not succeed or help him. Then he'll turn his attention to the coastlands and take many of them, but a commander will put an end to his insolence and turn it back on him. After this, he will turn back toward the fortresses of his own country, but will stumble and fall to be seen no more. I forget exactly how Antiochus Epiphanes died, but I don't think it was by war. But a little murky on the details, so I'm not going to try to say exactly. But I know that, because sometimes I get confused with Nero much later in Rome, AD, and Nero died of... Did he suicide or something, or is he? Yeah, I think he was a suicide, so he doesn't fit all the details of the king that gets the head wound that everybody's more familiar with. So anyway, but this is before that. Successor sends out a tax collector, will be destroyed, yet not in anger or in battle. So, disease, suicide, all these things are other ways that people die, of course. And then it says, I think this one is Antiochus Epiphanes, that succeeded by the contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. He will invade the kingdom when its people feel secure, and he will seize it through intrigue. Then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him. Both it and a prince of the covenant will be destroyed. This is at least partially fulfilled in the past. After coming to an agreement with him, he will act deceitfully, and only a few people he will rise to power. Then he will invade them when they feel secure, and achieve what neither he nor his fathers or forefathers did. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers and plot the overthrow of fortresses, but only for a time. So we have a type here of the coming Son of Perdition. He was certainly a foreshadowing of that. And then there's some more intrigue here about especially verse 27, the 2 kings with their hearts bent on evil will sit at the same table and lie to each other, but to no avail. This again is past history, and nothing has changed really as far as political intrigue goes. Then the king of the north returns to his own country with great wealth, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant. So this is talking about Israel. At the appointed time, he will invade the south again. Different outcome, ships of the western coastlands, and we're talking about the Mediterranean and Tarshish? No, Tyre and Sidon, over that way. With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant. That is to say, the people who were still, being faithful, at least in some respect, to the laws of Moses. But the people who know their God will firmly resist him. Those who are wise will instruct many, though for a time they will fall by the sword or be burned or captured or plundered. When they fall, they will receive a little help. Many who are not sincere will join them. Again, this could be a dual fulfillment. Some of the wise will stumble so that they may be refined, purified, and made spotless until the end, for it will still come at the appointed time. Then it seems to start switching more to the future. The king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors, or for the one desired by women, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. Instead of them, he will honor a god of fortresses, or possibly forces, a god unknown to his ancestors. He will honor with gold and silver and precious stones and costly gifts. He will attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign god, and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. He will make them rulers over many people and distribute the land at a price. The land is here, in this context, Old Testament is talking about, especially in prophecy, talking about the land of Israel. And I see another alert there, and it's Amanda Young. Thank you. Despite what I'm going through, I will not miss your show by lips. I don't know what Amanda's going through, but everybody pray for her and everybody else. And especially, we remember the people in Australia who are being burned out, and then we have all the turmoil in the Middle East, as always, and can't run. You'll never run out of people to pray for. Let me look at the chat since I've marked my spot there, and I looked away at it anyhow. So, let's see, all sorts of people. Glad to see you guys. YouTube shut me down for 1 week. Well, that's interesting. Larry, I don't know what's up with that. Didn't like your funny video. Okay, I didn't see it. Sorry. King of the North, Turkey. Possibly. King of the South, Saudi Arabia. Kind of partially. We're also talking Northern African continent. All around the Mediterranean, basically, those three directions. So yeah, especially for the past, it may extend in the future. Let's see, what happened to Antiochus Epiphanes is in second. Okay, yeah, there's more detail about him there. And then we have, let's see, almost sounds like Shia and Sunni Islam coming together against Israel. Kind of, sort of. More about that later. And, okay, yeah, Chow's filling you guys in on that stuff. That's awesome. Thank you. So it sounds like he was into poisoning people, too, and then he got what he deserved, that Antiochus Epiphanes. Alrighty. So, at that time of the end, and that we haven't seen that phrase before, but the time of the end, the king of the south will engage him in battle. The him we were just talking about, this son of perdition, we haven't been described as that yet, but this king who does as he pleases. And the king of the north will storm out against him. So we have north and south and this other king. So the son of perdition that we're describing in scripture is neither the king of the north nor the south. He will invade many countries, sweep through them like a flood. He will invade the beautiful land. That's pretty obviously about Israel. Many countries will fall, but Edom, Moab, and the leaders of Ammon will be delivered from his hand. So, Edom, Moab, and the leaders of Ammon are obviously not this beast person, right? Because those are ones he's attacking. Edom is pretty much Saudi Arabia. So, anyway, he will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape. So there's northern Africa. He will gain control of the treasuries of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt, with the Libyans and Cushites in submission. But reports from the east and the north will alarm him. So he's not in the east either. This is how I say, by process of elimination, the kingdom of the beast is the west. Where exactly west is, in my opinion, at the time of the end, it's the Western world, because there's no other direction left. So he will extend his power, but reports from the east and north will alarm him, and he will set out in a great rage to destroy and annihilate many. He will pitch his royal tents between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. And we have some footnotes here about the people from the upper Nile and sea, and the Hebrew there is a little obscure, but talking usually the sea without any other qualifiers is the Mediterranean there. So we know what area of the world we're talking about. And then let me go to chapter 12. because it kind of continues. At that time, there's that phrase again, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, whose people, Daniel's, that is to say, the nation of Israel, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as not happened from the beginning of nations until then. And this is the exact phrase that Jesus used and named Daniel. So he's looking back at this and saying it's going to happen again after the time of Christ. So it hasn't been fulfilled yet. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge. And that's a statement people get lots of mileage out of. But it's all talking about the time of the end. Okay, the very end. And then it says, I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river, one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. There's that phrase again. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. Now, our power is from the Holy Spirit, and that power cannot be broken, and no one can prevail against us. And Jesus said the gates of hell will not prevail against the church that he would build. And so this is not talking about us. This is talking about the faithful in Israel. And that this time of the end, this the second half of the 70 weeks prophecy we didn't look at in Daniel 9. We skipped over that because I've been over it so many times before. This is the second half of that. And that is the time that matches up with a lot of other prophecies that talk about Israel, the land of Israel being ransacked, Jerusalem being ransacked. And this is right after the abomination. And when then the faithful see that, they are supposed to run to the place prepared for them in the desert, where they will be preserved for time, times, and half a time. And so this is what that's talking about, matching up to Revelation. And Daniel says, I heard but did not understand. So I asked my Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? And he replied, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. Rolled up and sealed. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. That's also a phrase in Revelation that Revelation gets from here. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. From the time that the daily, and this is again about the second half, the time of the daily sacrifice is abolished, and the abomination that caused desolation is set up, from that time there will be 1,290 days. There's your 3.5 years again of 360-day years. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335. There's a bunch of speculation on that I'm not going to go into right now. As for you, go your way to the end. You will rest, and then at the end of your days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. So that's a whole bunch from Daniel, and things that are going on, that some of the stuff happened in the past and was all fulfilled. Some of it's partially fulfilled. And we know from what Jesus said that will be fulfilled again in the future, and it hasn't happened yet. So before I go on to some other passages, let me look at the chat again. Let's see. Kings in the north, the end of days are not men, they are horns that fly up to the firmament. I disagree, but that's okay. The seas are the beautiful, seas at the beautiful holy mountain is the waters above. Again, I disagree, but that's fine. Let's see. 2 streams today, yes. Every other Tuesday I do 2 streams. I will always do my one at this time, but every other Tuesday afternoon I do the other one on Quantum Eraser's channel. Hey everybody, good to see more people here. Alright, so we read through Daniel 7, 11, and 12. Now let's go to John 17. And this is all New Testament from here on out, so I'm going to go to mine, go to, whoops, scrolled too fast. John 17. Come on, load the page, there we go. And around verse 12. Let's see. Yeah. Jesus is speaking at the Last Supper. He says, I'm not remaining in the world, but these people are, and I'm returning to you. Holy Father, guard those who represent you, which you have given to me, so that they may be one just as we are. When I was with them in the world, I guarded those you gave me as your representatives. He's talking about his disciples. I watched over them, and not one of them was lost, except for the doomed one, in fulfillment of the writings. There's your son of perdition. That's what son of perdition means. It means the one doomed to destruction. Son of is a Hebraism. It's their expression for a member of the group or class of beings or whatever it is. Son of God is God. Son of man is a human. Son of Israel is an Israelite. And the son of perdition is the one doomed to destruction. That's what those names mean. So there's where we see the son of perdition in different passages use different terms, but the doomed one. So Jesus says, I watched over them, his disciples, not one of them was lost except for the doomed one. So who was the one Jesus lost? That would be Judas. So he was a fulfillment of prophecy, but certainly not the only ultimate final one. Okay, so Jesus introduced that term. And then we'll look in 2 Thessalonians 2. So let's go there. And Paul had written 2 letters. This one was in a response to a forgery, and he has to correct some things he said before. So let's look at the first 12 verses. Now, brothers and sisters, concerning the coming of our Master Jesus the Anointed and our gathering together with him. That's 2 things. And so we have his coming and we have our gathering. Please do not be easily disturbed or alarmed in your minds or spirits, because no word or letter has come from us saying that the day of the Master or the day of the Lord is already here. Don't let anyone fool you by any means, because that won't happen. What won't happen? The day of the Lord, until after the departure. What is a departure? It does not say a falling away. It does not say that in the Greek. Apostasia means to stand apart, and in every English translation before the King James, it was rendered departing or departure. That's what the word means, and it gets further meaning from the context, which here is not false teachings. It is the time of the end, the day of the Lord. So, that day of the Lord won't happen until after the departure, and it has the definite article the departure, a specific departure, and then the lawless one, the destroyer, will be revealed. This is that son of perdition again. This is my translation. I just happened to see that. This says the Gift New Testament. I think I have links to everything in the description, but of course, Chow will have one for you if you need it. Anyway, the lawless one, opposes everything and elevates himself over every god or object of worship, even to the point of seating himself in the temple of God and proclaiming himself God. We read that in Daniel just now. You have forgotten that I told you these things when I was with you. So Paul is reminding them and settling them and putting them at ease, because a forgery had gone out saying the day of the Lord had already started and they missed the departure. And they would then start looking for this son of perdition, and they were all upset because someone wrote a false teaching, a forgery in Paul's name that said that this had happened. And he says, don't be alarmed. We didn't say any such thing. Don't let anyone fool you, because that day of the Lord won't happen until after the departure, and then the lawless one will be revealed. So if the departure hasn't happened, you haven't seen the lawless one. And then verse 6, and you know what's holding him back for now, so that he is only revealed in his time. Well, that departure didn't happen, did it? So that's in some way what's holding him back. For although the secret of lawlessness is already in operation, it is only after the restrainer is taken out of the way that the lawless one will be revealed. So the departure has to do with the restrainer being taken out of the way. And you can see on my footnote, the literal Greek reads, restrainer until out of the middle may appear, a phrase meaning to stand out from among others. That is to say, to be revealed. There's a technical discussion. I have a link there. If you go to my website, you'll see that, and you can click on it. One scholar holds that this matter of being out of the way must be understood as passive. That is, the restrainer is taken out of the way rather than stepping out of the way of its own volition. So, back up here, this is the one the Master Jesus will do away with by the breath of his mouth and will neutralize when he appears as his rival. This has not happened yet. Like I said, it didn't happen to Nero. Nero committed suicide. He will come when the adversary, that is to say Satan, is at the height of its power, which he held by means of signs and fake miracles and seduction. This injustice will all have been done to those who are dying because they, and this is to who the great delusion goes to, they would not love the truth that would save them. So these are people against the gospel. And as a result, God will send them in the wrong direction. And again, the footnote, a strong delusion traditionally, but the Greek words are actually an action of diversion. That means like turning the road signs to the way they're not going to the right places. That's what God is going to do to them who have hated the truth that would save them. So the strong delusion is not anything people do. It's not anything Satan does. It's something God does to people who hate the truth of the gospel that would save them. So they will believe the lie, and in this way, all who rejected the truth and celebrated injustice will be condemned. So Paul is giving additional detail about something that happens before the day of the Lord, and then he tells us about this son of perdition, which he calls the lawless one. Now we're going to go to Revelation, a whole bunch of references here. And for the sake of having them conveniently in one place, I'm going to go back to Bible Gateway. I know I could do this on mine, but I need to do something about the formatting there sometimes. It says, Revelation 11:7, now when they have finished their testimony, the two witnesses, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower them and kill them. This again is another description of the son of perdition. Revelation 13, 1 through 18 says, the dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads. So out of the sea, it is not coming out of the land of Israel. It's coming out of the nations. This dragon, or the beast, the dragon is watching. So the dragon is the power behind the beast. And the beast comes out of the sea, out of the nations, had 10 horns and 7 heads, which should sound familiar from Daniel, with 10 crowns on its horns. So these are royal kings. And then on each head, a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard. Remember Daniel? But had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. So it's a deception, and it wasn't fatal, though it might have been a real wound. But again, the head of the beast stands for a person, so this person had appeared to have a fatal wound. So in my opinion, this is talking about a fake resurrection and not someone with a head wound. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People, because, who would, this is someone who appeared to have risen from the dead, and that's why people are following after him. People worshipped the dragon, that is to say, worshipped Satan directly, because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked who is like the beast who can wage war against it. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words, we saw that before in Daniel, and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. Guess what? That's half a year, or 3.5 years, half of the 7 years. 42 months. It opens its mouth to blaspheme God and slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and conquer them. Well, again, what did Jesus say about his church? That the gates of hell would not prevail against them? But here, whoever these holy people are cannot be the church because they're God's holy people, but they're being conquered by evil, by the gates of hell. And the beast, was given authority over every tribe, people, nation, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone's to go into captivity, they will go. If anyone's to be killed with a sword, they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. Who are God's people? Again, they can't be the church because they're being prevailed over by the forces of evil. And then the beast out of the earth. That was the one out of the sea. A lot of people don't know there are 2 beasts. The second beast coming out of the earth, or the land, and that's talking about Israel. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. So a fake Christ figure. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So this is someone who was wounded by a weapon, and it seemed to be a fatal wound. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast. So we've got the first beast, the second beast, and the image, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. Whether that's AI or what, we don't know. It's not really that important. It also forced, the second beast, okay, also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Notice a couple of things here. It's the second beast that orders the mark of the beast, not the first beast, but the second one orders it on behalf of the first. It goes on the right hand or forehead, and you have to have it to buy or sell, but it's the name of the beast or the number of its name, not the name or ID or bank account of us. So the name of a number of the beast, not us. This calls for wisdom, so this is a mystery. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. So this is not necessarily an evil number, it's just referring to the beast's number, so the numerical equivalent of his name or the name of all humanity is something. They have got a footnote there to say. So there you have more about the beast. That's the first beast whose name and number is ordered by the second beast to be inscribed on everyone. And that's the word in Greek is an etching, a digging in, like you would, like a tattoo or scratching something with a stick in the ground. I have not heard the Hebrews referred to as Shasu or, well, LBRY is a different pronunciation of it, is where we get Hebrew. So yeah, I know where you're going with that, but I can't chase that down right now. But Hebrew means wanderer. There's also a couple of other possibilities, but it's found in the Old Testament. But yeah, I don't want to get into that right now. Anyway, so we know some things about the beast. Okay, now let's go on to Revelation 14:9. A third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or their right hand, and that they will be, I wish I should have had more verses there, but it goes on to say, well, let's just put that in another thing here. Let's go to Revelation 14, because I don't want to lose my place on the other one. We'll go to 14, and I think it's verse 9. They will, if anyone does that, they will drink the wine of the fury of God, the wrath of God, full strength, and will be tortured in fire and sulfur before the messengers of the holy people and the Lamb. The smoke of their torture rises forever. There is no relief day or night, so they're conscious, for those who worship the wild animal, the beast, and its image, and who take the inscription of its name. So there you have the fate of those who do this, contrary to some popular teachers who say that if you take the mark, you can still be saved. That's not what Scripture says. Let me go back to here. Revelation 14:11. That was part of that passage. I don't know why I think I must have mistyped something. It should have been 9-11. Then 15:2 says, I saw what looked like a sea of glass glowing with fire, and standing beside the sea, those who had been victorious over the beast and its image, and over the number of its name. That's interesting. Over the number of its name. So there are people who were martyred for not accepting. And then 16:2, the first angel went out and poured his bowl on the land, and ugly, festering sores broke out on the people who had the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. And in my opinion, this is because the mark of the beast involves some sort of DNA infusion, and that the body is starting to reject it. So everyone who took the mark is suffering from these horrible malignant sores because they took the mark of the beast as their first punishment. They will not escape. They will be punished forever, as we just read. And then Revelation 16:10, the fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and its kingdom was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in agony. So this is the kingdom of the beast. The throne of the beast and its king, so its seat of power, and his whole kingdom was plunged into darkness. And so this is more that we know about the beast. And then verse 13, then I saw three impure or unclean spirits that looked like frogs. So this is where people get the idea of reptilians. They came out of the mouth of the dragon, Satan, out of the mouth of the beast, the Antichrist, Son of Perdition, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, also known as the second beast. So all three of these have been demonically possessed. And then 17:3, the scene changes, of course, and the angel carried John, away in spirit into a wilderness, a deserted area. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. So again, the 7 heads and 10 horns, it goes back to what we read in Daniel. And we're told that its color is red. And there's a woman riding it. She's another entity. People get confused. There's the first beast, the second beast. The second beast is also the false prophet. And the woman riding the beast. She is not the beast or the false prophet. She's another entity. And she is the one with the name, the cryptic name, Babylon the Great. It is not Mystery Babylon, as I've gone over before. And then 17:8, the angel is telling us what these things mean. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. So in the time of John, the beast had existed before, was not existing in his day, so it wasn't Nero or even Domitian or anybody like that. Now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss. So it will come up from the pit. The inhabitants of the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. So they're amazed at this entity that has come from the distant past. And then 11 through 14, the beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. Remembering Daniel and the little horn that grew up and uprooted the 3 others. The beast is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7, is going to his destruction. There's that word destruction again. Also, this is where we get the word Apollyon or Abaddon for the one coming out of the abyss. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received the kingdom. So again, it's not Rome. But who for 1 hour, that is to say a very short time, will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They will have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb. But the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. So, this has not happened yet. There has never been a king receiving authority from other kings who stood against the Lamb and his people and fought against them. So that's what we have in Revelation, okay? So we've looked at all the pertinent scriptures that I wanted to go over, and now what I want to do is go back to this document that I've had before, I've gone over before, and Appendix B, a closer look at the prophet Daniel. So let me look at the chat again before I go into that. Let's see. Departure is probably space exploration now. There's been many rockets sent up. There is one, the specific departure that has not happened yet. And the day of the Lord has not begun. Yeah, it's not Elon Musk, sorry. Let's see. Admiralty law comes out of the sea. Yeah, that's about as far as you can connect them together. But we're talking about a beast from the sea, an entity who does certain things, and so I think that, there's not enough things that fit. Rockets are not the only things that make fire come down from heaven. This will be a supernatural event. Nobody would be awed by rockets coming down from heaven. People will see this fire coming down from heaven and be amazed. And I'm pretty sure people today are not amazed by rockets. Anyway, okay, I've already read that comment about the Hebrews. Worship and taking the mark are always together. Yeah, because that's a good point about worshiping and the beast and taking the mark, because that's telling us that the taking of the mark is a pledge of loyalty to the beast. So it can't be just any mark. It's the name or number of the beast because you're pledging loyalty as one of his worshippers. Let's see. In my next video, we'll have Romans 8 in Greek playing over it. Awesome. Okay. Can you imagine today's American pop culture being so enamored with someone like Obama going to a cult like trans? Yeah, they did. They practically worshiped the guy. So that's not unforeseeable at all. Anyway, so now let's look at this Appendix B that I've had before. And again, this is linked in the description. Though prophecies are scattered throughout the Old Testament, the best known and most remarkable are found in Daniel, in my opinion. Most of it's come to pass, but not all, some of it partially. The important thing is that it gives a sequence, not necessarily a timing, but a sequence that you don't see in a lot of other prophecies or prophetic books. So we need to pay attention to this. This is really important to Revelation. Oh, I see another super chat. Thank you, Chow, again. Don't give up meeting together as some have done, but encourage each other, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Hebrews 10:25. Thank you. Very nice and generous of you. But anyway, so an abomination in prophecy is understood to mean that an idol is set up in a holy place that belonged to another god. You can see that in Ezekiel 8. So we know what an abomination of desolation is. It's desecration of a temple of a god. Its purpose is to defile the other god's temple. Its first use in the Bible is Daniel 9:27. Immediately after, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. The next two references are in Daniel 11:31 and 12:11. We read those, and include the phrase profane the sanctuary. So this is a desecration again. Apocryphal books between the Testaments also used in the context of desecrating the temple. Antiochus Epiphanes, and Chow had a reference to that already also in the chat. Died in 164 BC, is the only historical figure to deliberately fill the temple with unclean things, especially a statue of Zeus with his own face on it in the holy place. So we've just read a description of that also in Revelation. And so Daniel's prophecy of the abomination was indeed fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes, but Jesus, long after all of this, so almost, like 161 or so years later, well, actually, since he was grown up, but more closer to 190 years later, referred to the abomination as referring to a yet future event. Paul also spoke of the man of lawlessness, we read already in 2 Thessalonians, entering the temple and declaring himself God, and this is qualifies as a desecration. And in Revelation 13:14, we're told that an image or idol will be made. We read that, and everyone will be forced to worship it, though it technically doesn't say it will be in the temple. This is just one of many prophecies that seem to have had a now but not yet fulfillment. They're fulfilled in part at one time, fulfilled more completely at another time. So the question is whether the complete fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy was met in the destruction of Jerusalem in the temple of 70 AD. And it should be understood that a complete fulfillment must meet every criterion and detail without exception. And this is what preterism gets very, very wrong. They try to say other things that so supposedly fulfill that, but it just doesn't work when you look at the details. So let's look at three passages in the Gospels. Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 are all saying the same thing, but there's a little bit of difference in detail. We'll see these events. The gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world, the gospel of the kingdom, as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. When you see the abomination of desolation, as declared through the prophet Daniel, those are Jesus' words, standing in the holy place, when you see that, they had seen it before, but he said they would see it again. When you see this desecration in the temple, then those in Judea must run away to the mountains. They have not done that. The only people who left in AD 70 were mostly Christians, and they didn't go to the mountains. They went to a rather low-lying area that starts with an A, the name I can never remember. I think I might have it later down in this document. After that will be great oppression, the likes of which has never happened from the beginning of the world until now. That certainly didn't happen in 70 AD, nor will ever happen again. Far worse things have happened. So this is not fulfilled yet. In fact, if those days had not been cut short, all flesh would have been wiped out, but they will be shortened for the sake of the chosen people. Then in Mark 13, when you see, it doesn't start with gospel of the kingdom. It starts with when you see the abomination, those in Judea must run away to the mountains. The suffering those days unlike anything before. So the same thing. And then Luke 21 says, this is something different. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by military encampments, you will know that its ruin is near. Okay, that, in my opinion, is 70 AD. But then, matching up with the other three gospel accounts, then those in Judea must run away to the mountains. Again, they did not do that. Then the terrible times that had never happened before will never happen again. Have not happened yet. They will be killed in battle, taken captive to other nations. Then Jerusalem will be trampled by the nations until their time is up. You could argue in some ways that, yes, that's happened. But there is a specific prophecy, I think, in Joel that talks about the city being overrun and the houses ransacked and the women ravished, and that this will go on for 3.5 years, which is why people of Judea are told to run when they see this abomination. Then, if this hasn't happened either, there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. And we know what those signs are. They're not simply constellations or alignments. They are really weird things that everyone would see without a telescope. And without knowing something about the zodiac, there will be things that the sun turns dark, the moon turns to blood, and the stars fall from the sky like a fig tree shaken by a strong wind, and the figs drop early. That's what John described what he saw, and that has not happened. And on the earth, in addition to that, the nations will be filled with anguish and perplexity due to the roaring and turbulence of the sea. There's another passage in the Old Testament that talks about the earth being shaken and that it reels like a drunkard. That has not happened. So, in my opinion, this is a connection to that, where if God is literally like picking up a bowl of water and shaking it, that think of what that will do at the scale of the ocean sloshing around. This isn't just a tsunami. This is the oceans going back and forth, back and forth. People will be deathly afraid and apprehensive of what is coming upon the whole world, for the forces of the heavens will be shaken. This has not happened. And they will see the Son of Man, coming in a cloud with great power and majesty. That, remember at the transfiguration, or not, the ascension, when the two angels appeared and said, "Why are you staring at heaven? The same Jesus will come again the way you saw him leave," which is with your own eyes, being covered up by the clouds. So he'll come in the sky visibly, and this is how he left, and that's what the angel said he would come back in that way, not figuratively, not invisibly, but visibly. And then when you see all this coming to pass, stand up and raise your heads, for you're about to be rescued. This is talking about the very end of the tribulation. History shows that the people of Judea were indeed scattered among the Gentile nations, and Jerusalem has been trampled by them throughout. Even today, there is much Gentile control over Jerusalem, and the Israelis are not allowed to build their temple in its ancient location, which, by the way, is not right where the Dome of the Rock is. And there have been, of course, many wars and natural disasters in the last 2,000 years, but this is the problem. You got to fulfill every little thing. Did anyone desecrate the temple in 70 AD? Though it was burned and dismantled by the armies of Titus, he did not set up any idol in it. Neither did he take his place in the temple and proclaim himself God, for all those references we just read. That did not happen. Did the people of Judea flee to the mountains when they saw Jerusalem surrounded? There is no indisputable record of any mass exodus at that time to the mountains. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, the Roman armies allowed, or I didn't mention this part, but the Roman armies allowed people into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, but refused to let them leave in order to put great strain on their resources and supplies during the siege. And now I have a footnote to back that up. Was the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple sudden, per those references? Clearly not. The events leading up to the final siege did not happen in a day, and again, I've got that documented. Did Nero, whom some identify as the final fulfillment of the prophecies of both Daniel and Revelation, die as specified in 2 Thessalonians 2:8 and Revelation 19? No, he committed suicide. I alluded to this earlier. It said Jesus will destroy with the breath of his coming, and the sword coming out of his mouth. That did not happen to Nero. Neither did he or any of his associates cause the whole world, even if limited to the Roman Empire, to take a mark on their forehead or right hand and forbid commerce without it. None of that has happened. Did Jesus return with the clouds accompanied by all the signs in the sky and set up his visible earthly kingdom for 1,000 years? This should have happened at or very shortly after the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. If that event marks the final fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy in Revelation, which is what preterism insists. Yet the only way to claim it happened is to completely spiritualize it or allegorize it, and this is inconsistent with the claim that everything else, such as the destruction and the abomination, was literal and physical. This is the inconsistency of the allegorical method, was that somehow it's literal when it says that there will be an abomination and a destruction, that those things are literal and physical and you can see them, but not the return of Christ. You know, none of this other stuff. So they're very picky choosy on what things are to be seen literally and what are not. They don't have any consistent standard that they're following here. So, while some aspects of prophecy were fulfilled in 70 AD and others in the ensuing centuries, other important details have yet to occur. And we cannot presume that only the unfulfilled parts remain, since we have already seen that Jesus puts events such as the abomination in the future, in spite of it having been fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes in the past. So, how much of the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation remain is anyone's guess, but we should note that the abomination in fleeing Jerusalem is also seen in Revelation 12 and 13. However, there are parts of the book of Daniel that have had many details fulfilled in the past. This is why I wanted to read through Daniel. Daniel 2 through 7 and 11, and we read most of that. We did 7, but we did not do chapters 2 through 6. Have been the most perplexing aspects of the book to critics of Bible prophecy due to their detailed predictions of successive kingdoms. And it's important for us to be aware of this, and some mistakenly hold all of it to be yet future. That's wrong too, as well as all of it being past, and confuse it with modern events. So, again, we're going to look at this in detail. Chapter 2 is Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue with the head made of gold. We didn't read that part. The chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, lower legs of iron, and feet of a mixture of iron and clay. Daniel identified the head as Nebuchadnezzar himself, king of Babylon, of the Babylonian Empire. After him would come a lesser kingdom, Medo-Persia, ruled by Darius the Mede and Cyrus the Persian. Then another, the Grecian Empire, ruled by Alexander the Great. I mentioned that. And finally, one that would smash all others, that being Rome. Okay? Chapter 8 is a vision about a goat and a ram, and the angel tells Daniel that the ram's 2 horns represent the kings of Media and Persia, so it doesn't mean something else. It describes the conquests of Alexander the Great, the first king of Greece, after whose death 4 of the generals would rule, and these are the 4 I mentioned before, and this is their names: Lysimachus, Cassander, Seleucus, from which we get the Seleucid Empire, and Ptolemy. And there were more than one of those. They're Ptolemies. The literal horn coming up later was none other than the vile Antiochus Epiphanes, who did not die in battle, but from an infestation of worms, as I think Chow had mentioned in the chat earlier. It's the 4 generals who are described in detail in chapter 11. Ptolemy the first was the king of the south. The daughter was Berenice, actually with granddaughter, because her father was Ptolemy the second, who was given in marriage to Antiochus the second, in a doomed plan to achieve political gains by intrigue and deception. After various raids and generations, this king of the south was Ptolemy the fourth, and then Ptolemy the fifth. So we got a bunch of those. The king of the north was Antiochus the third, who, as prophesied, was utterly defeated in 217 BC, and you know this by historical record. The details fit historical record as with the Ptolemies right up to the contemptible person Antiochus Epiphanes. It is he who is believed to have engineered the murder of a prince of the covenant, Onias III, the high priest. The first chapter of the apocryphal book, 1 Maccabees, details his plundering the temple and other acts of savagery. So, although these things were fulfilled in the past, we can't dogmatically state that no future fulfillments remain, but neither can we presume that these alliances and military campaigns will be repeated. A lot of people presume that. A lot of us futurists presume that. I don't presume that. I don't know. In all the details of the remaining prophecies given in Revelation, there was no mention of the kings of the north and south, and details that would connect them to future events. So, though a future fulfillment is possible, it doesn't seem very likely to me, because the kings of the north and south are not mentioned in Revelation. But starting in verse 36, we read of the king who exalts himself, we read about that, who has no regard for the gods of his fathers or desired of women, and will instead honor a god of fortresses. Now, you could tie him in, if you just were reading in Daniel, like we were, to discussion of Antiochus Epiphanes and the kings of the north and south, but these new details have no historical precedent. And they're tied in with chapter 12, which begins, as we saw, at that time, and includes the resurrection of the dead. So there's that past and future aspect of these prophecies. So Antiochus Epiphanes is a very clear type or foreshadow of the ultimate future fulfillment in the Antichrist or beast, son of perdition, the lawless one, etc., etc. And chapter 12 is where we see the phrase Jesus used, time of distress, such as not happened from the beginning of nations until then. So that did not happen in 70 AD. It just didn't. There's been a lot of suffering since then. The fall of Jerusalem at that time cannot have been the ultimate fulfillment of the prophecy. But because of this overlap and duality, teachers of Bible prophecy must exercise restraint and caution in looking for modern fulfillments. There's a lot of what's called newspaper eschatology, where people take every headline of what's going on a given day and say, this is it. But we'll know it when we get there. Back to chapter 7 in Daniel, the first half is a dream about 4 beasts. We read that. Second half is in the interpretation. We read that. Focusing primarily on the 4th beast. So the first 3 are described as the winged lion, bear, and a winged leopard. The 4th is not compared to any known animal. It has 10 horns, 3 of which are replaced, as we read. And this beast would overcome the righteous for 3.5 years. And the 4th beast description exactly matches that of Revelation, such as in 13:1, and 5-8, and 17, 12, and 13. And none of this describes a situation of 70 AD. None of it. So now that we have a good idea what's going on with Daniel, we can focus on the 70 weeks prophecy of chapter 9, which we didn't read tonight, since it lays out a clear sequence for all remaining prophecies about Israel. The first 69 of those weeks was marked as completed when Jesus came, because he was cut off after the 69th week. So now 7 years remain, divided into 2 halves at the point where the 7-year treaty is broken by the abomination. This is all very clear in Daniel 9. So when we see this same event in the New Testament, we know that it marks the midpoint of the 7 years, such that the 3.5 years remain and before the return of Jesus to the earth from that point and the restoration of Israel and Jerusalem. But we must not overlook the stated purpose of those 70 weeks. To end and atone for sin, begin eternal righteousness, seal up prophecy, that is to say, fulfill it, and anoint or dedicate the most holy place. That is not us, it is the holy place in the temple, the holiest inner place of the temple. But these things are all specified as applying to your people and your holy city, meaning the people of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. Thus, the atonement for sin and end of all prophecy will not be completed until that final 7 years ends. This is a very clear and focused prophecy to and about Israel and Jerusalem rather than the church or world at large. And we have other prophecies and other accounts that talk about the other nations, but this one is very specific and exclusive. And there are footnotes there about other things such as, that I mentioned were backed up by these documents. And then the one I want to go over here, commonly believe that the 2 legs of the statue represent some kind of division or separation, yet the statue also has 2 arms and 2 feet without anyone presuming such separation. So I don't think the 2 legs of the statue mean Eastern and Western Roman Church. I don't think that. The significance of the statue is in the metals, not in the structure except for the feet as a mixture of iron and clay. Just as we do not separate the 10 toes into 2 groups of 5, so also we should not think that the 2 or lower legs, curiously the upper legs or thighs are never seen as a division either, represent any division. As for the feet and toes, the text states that the iron and clay represent a divided kingdom of strength and weakness. That's what the text tells us. Composed of a mixture of seeds, according to Daniel 2:41-43. Will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. So you can read that there. Whether this mixture means a clash of cultures and ideologies, or even between humans and semi or non-humans, the focus is on their inability to blend, not the reason for the inability. The division is between strength and weakness, not east and west. So do you have a good handle on who the son of perdition is and is not? We've got a lot of detail. I didn't go over every bit of it, but it's been an hour, so I'm going to, that's all the material I wanted to go over. So let me look at the chat some more and see if there's any other questions about Son of Perdition, or if everybody's gone off to something else. Uh, let's see. Remember the spiral over Norway? Yeah, I saw that. But nobody went chasing after a beast to worship it as a result of that. That has to happen as well. And fire coming down from heaven. This was a blue light. It wasn't fire coming down from heaven. But I do remember that. No, Jesus did not cause the sacrifice and oblation, not obulation, to cease. They kept going. It didn't stop. The temple was still in operation by the time of the writing of the book of Hebrews, which was before 70 AD, because the temple was still standing, and they were still doing the sacrifices. So he didn't cause it to stop. Oh, you did correct that, oblation. Yeah, oblation is pretty funny typo. No, the abomination was not sacrificed in the temple after Jesus' resurrection. That's an arbitrary made-up thing. The abomination is what Jesus himself defined as looking back to the prophet Daniel was fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes, and we know in general what an abomination is. It's when you desecrate a temple, and Jesus did not desecrate the temple. Why would he do that? It was his own temple. So the fact that they would make sacrifices afterwards is not an abomination of desolation. They're not putting unclean animals on the altar. Let's see. Paying closer attention. Okay. Meteor shower caused by a comet broke them. Well, as far as stars falling to heaven, those who believe in standard cosmology would have to go with something like that, because what else could it be? But if you believe that the biblical cosmology, that the stars, sun, moon, and stars of Genesis 1 says are in the firmament, it's not all that far away. It's holding up the waters above, and those things are going to fall like figs from a tree. So that just doesn't, I'm not seeing that. It could be meteors or something like that, but I'm thinking it's not. Mountain hurled into the sea may or may not be an asteroid. We don't know. We can't say that it absolutely is. It certainly could be. Let's see. I don't believe there's space, so how can there be space objects? But, unless we were talking about the firmament. Let's see. More things in the chat. Somebody's eating a nice dinner. About the lakes. Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that the Bible doesn't talk about the division of east and west there. And nobody seems to ask what about the left and right arms or hands or the 10 fingers or anything like that. So we got to be careful of not reading too much into things and just give what the Bible gives us, take what the Bible gives us. Okay, but yeah, and again, what people think, there's a lot of amazing things that happen, but in this case, from what the Bible describes, people will, because of it, worship the beast who made it happen, and nobody's worshiping Elon Musk or NASA, or well, some people are pretty crazy about it, but they're not worshiping an individual entity who has a kingdom. So, do the stars disappearing have something to do with it? I've heard about stars disappearing. I can't verify it, so I can't really comment on that. But anyway, the focus was on who this entity is. It's not Satan himself, someone possessed by Satan, given the power of Satan, and that this has to do with this is the person who signs the 7-year covenant. Why don't we go to Daniel 9, go back to Bible Gateway, because I have to do that to get to Daniel, and looked real briefly at that. I've looked at this 100 times before, but the 77s, 77s for your people and your holy city. So it's very specific about Jerusalem, the temple, and the people of Israel. This is past history from the time to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One comes. There will be 7 sevens and 62. So we have a group of seven sets of years and then 62. So the total is 490. 7 times 7 is 70 is 490. But 1 7 remains. Jerusalem will be rebuilt with streets and entrenchment in times of trouble. You can read about some of that in Nehemiah and those books. After the 62, not after the 7, but after the 62, after the 7, The anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. So that's what happened to Jesus after the 62. So one remains. The people of the ruler who comes will destroy the city and sanctuary. That was Titus, the Roman. His people destroyed the sanctuary. Titus himself actually didn't order it. And then some other stuff happens after that. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. This is an unknown period of time. And then, after that unknown period of time, which still continues to this day, talking about the nearest antecedent, is the people of the ruler who come. The ruler who came was Titus, so a Roman ruler will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. Jesus did not confirm a covenant for 1/7, and he said at his death, not his birth or his beginning of his public ministry at his baptism, neither of those was the signing of a covenant. He said, my death, it will be the signing of the new covenant in my blood. He will sign the covenant with his own blood. See also Hebrews 9. And it wasn't for 1/7. So this is not that. Jesus did not do that. This is the Roman ruler will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and at the temple he will put up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. There is no end to Jesus. He did not end. So Jesus cannot have fulfilled that. But just to go over that again real briefly, I've gone over it in detail before. Let's see, the firmament is one of two things. The atmosphere of space, the water is above the firmament, would then be speaking of what is outside the universe of space. Okay, but the problem is that the firmament holds up waters, and that Genesis 1 says that the sun, moon, and stars are in the firmament. So there's water above that. I used to think also that if there was water outside the universe, it would be ice, and maybe this is where comets come from. But now we know that even standard cosmology agrees that comets are not balls of ice at all. And, there's a lot of other issues with that, but I don't want to get into that right now. So much more going on up there than you can see from the sky. That's true. You can draw almost anything if you connect the right dots. That's true. So anyway, this is really not about cosmology. It's about the Son of Perdition. And I think it's pretty obvious and impossible to debunk that this person, the 70th 7 has not happened. The signs in the sun, moon, and stars have not happened because the sun has not turned black, the moon has not turned blood red, the stars have not fallen from the sky like a fig tree dropping its figs. And a bazillion other details have not happened yet. And there has to be a temple rebuilt in Jerusalem in order for it to be desecrated. So, anyway, this is not meant to be an entire prophecy discussion, but mainly to highlight who the Son of Perdition is, that this person has had types and shadows in the past, but there is going to be a final fulfillment. That person will be also known as the beast, the Antichrist, and, all the other things that he'll do, desecrating a temple among them. So, everything you ever wanted to know about the Son of Perdition, hopefully at least got something to go on. Anyway, that's all I have. I think there's been a request under one of the previous videos to do a video on Mormonism, which I will do next Tuesday. And tomorrow I will upload a presentation I did earlier today on Quantum Eraser channel in the series on the Christian faith. And that's all I got going on right now. So, there you have it. If you had any comments, of course, there's a very little comment on the videos actually compared to views, but that's okay. I don't know how long YouTube will allow me to run anyway. You just never know, any little thing. But I have a whole prophecy playlist, and I've gone over all this stuff, and I also have a series going through the entire Bible, half hour at a time. There's a playlist for that. So I just wanted to highlight on the Son of Perdition and the Beast Antichrist, Lawless One, that we have not seen yet. The final fulfillment that we haven't seen. we are the temple of the Holy Spirit, but we are not, of course, the temple of Jerusalem or the temple of Israel. And there will be a physical temple, absolutely. Up above the last comment from me. Okay, let's see. When he returns, some of the world will be in night, so how will they see? Well, people have lights, and there's, the sun, or the moon, and the stars at night. But there's going to be a special kind of darkness that's going to come on the kingdom of the beast. So anyway, any questions about the Son of Perdition? Let's see. If we are the temple of God and God dwells in us, and when the abomination be mad being made over in Satan's image. No, because there's too many details that don't fit. We are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit dwells in us, but it's impossible for an idol to be set there as it was by Antiochus Epiphanes. This is our type and shadow which Jesus himself referred to, and what he did tells us what's going to happen, and what he did is put an idol on the temple. He also sacrificed a pig on the altar. So that's how you desecrate a temple. That's how you do an abomination. And it would be very strange for the Apostle Paul not to write anything about this abomination in a spiritual sense to the body of Christ. So since we are the body of Christ and we are dwelt by the Holy Spirit, it would be impossible for anyone to set up an abomination there. So those are some of the reasons why I wouldn't think that would fit. But there are many who are just very adamant that I'm a complete moron and heretic, because they believe that since we do have the Holy Spirit on our the temple of the Holy Spirit, that somehow none of the other things will be literally physically fulfilled. I happen to disagree with that conclusion, of course, but just to be aware that that's a thing. All right, well, I think I'm going to call it a night, and like I said, next week we're going to do Mormonism, and hope you all learn something, and we'll see you again. And so I don't know, from now on I may try to do some things on D-Live, some live streams there I'm hoping to do from Discord and have a group of people and not just me lecturing, because when I just lecture I have a lot of prep to do and it's a lot of work, and I'm already, like I said, doing that series on the other channel, on Quantum Eraser channel, every other week, and that takes preparation. So anything else I would do besides Tuesday stuff is probably going to be group discussions that I don't have to do a whole presentation on. So just to let you know what the plans are. So yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for the generous contributions and kind comments. And we will see you all another time. Thanks for coming.